Automatic doors open. Shopping carts glide through illuminated aisles, surrounded by hundreds of colorful packages promising energy, health, convenience, and well-being. It has never been so easy to put food on the table. In just a few minutes, a family can leave a supermarket with enough food for weeks. At first glance, this seems like one of the greatest achievements in human history. But there's an uncomfortable question hidden among the shelves. If we produce more food today than at any other time in history, why have diseases like obesity, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, fatty liver disease, and other metabolic problems grown so rapidly in recent decades? How did we reach the point where overeating and nutritional deficiencies can coexist in the same person? The most intriguing thing is that this change didn't happen overnight. There wasn't a single scientific discovery. No law changed everything at once, nor was it a single food that changed the fate of our health. It was a slow transformation. Silent. So gradual that almost no one noticed it happening. For thousands of years, our ancestors shaped their lives around food. They planted, harvested, hunted, fished, and cooked, using ingredients available in each season. Eating required time, effort, and planning. Food spoiled quickly, and for that very reason, it was consumed close to its natural state. Then, in just over a century, everything changed. Cities grew, factories multiplied production. Science developed new ways to preserve food. Agriculture underwent a technological revolution. Companies discovered ways to produce increasingly cheaper, more durable, standardized, and extremely convenient meals. For the first time, it was possible to manufacture food on an industrial scale and distribute it to millions of people. This advancement brought undeniable benefits. Hunger decreased in many regions of the planet. Transportation became more efficient. Preservation evolved. Many foods became accessible year-round, regardless of the season. But every transformation carries consequences. While we celebrated the abundance, another change was happening almost invisibly. Our diet has ceased to be defined solely by nature and has become shaped by technology, industry, marketing, and the accelerated pace of modern life. Without realizing it, we have stopped choosing foods solely for their nutritional value. We have started choosing them for practicality, for speed, for convenience, for durability, for flavors carefully developed to awaken the desire to eat more. This change has been so profound that, today, many people have never known another reality. For them, opening a package may seem as natural as picking a fruit directly from a tree was for previous generations. The great irony is that we have never been so surrounded by food, and at the same time, so confused about what it really means to eat well. Is the problem with modern foods, with how they are produced, with how our brains respond to this new food environment? Or did the real revolution happen long before we put the first food on our plate? Answering this question requires going back in time and reconstructing one of the most important changes in human history. A transformation that began with good intentions, solved gigantic problems, fed billions of people, and at the same time, created challenges that continue to influence our health every day. To understand why food seems to have changed its function, we first need to discover exactly when this silent revolution began. For almost all of humanity's existence, food was determined primarily by geography, climate, and the seasons. What was available to eat depended on the land, rainfall, harvests, and often luck. A drought could mean famine. A plague could destroy an entire crop. A war could interrupt the supply of cities for months. Food production has always been one of civilization's greatest challenges. It was precisely to face this problem that one of the greatest revolutions in history began. At the end of the 19th century, and especially throughout the 20th century, the world entered an era of profound transformations. Machines replaced some manual labor. Railways and ships accelerated transportation. Electricity reached factories. New preservation techniques allowed food to travel thousands of kilometers without spoiling. For the first time, large-scale production ceased to be a dream and became a reality. At the same time, another phenomenon was completely changing society. Cities were growing at an unprecedented rate. Millions of people were leaving the countryside to work in industry. Those who previously cultivated part of their own food became increasingly dependent on commerce for sustenance. This created an enormous challenge: how to feed ever-growing urban populations every day, all year round. The answer came from science, engineering, and agriculture. In the following decades, more productive seeds, synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, irrigation, and mechanization transformed grain production. This set of advances, known as the Green Revolution, allowed for an extraordinary increase in agricultural productivity in many countries. In various regions of the world, this progress helped reduce hunger and prevented food crises that seemed inevitable. It was a historic achievement, but it brought a little discussed consequence. When the main objective became producing more calories per hectare, crops such as wheat, corn, rice, and soybeans gained enormous prominence. These foods became abundant, cheap, and extremely versatile for industry. At the same time, factories learned to separate, refine, and recombine ingredients. Grain ceased to be just a grain. Corn could become starch, then glucose, then sweeteners, then thickeners. The oil extracted from the seeds could be used in dozens of different products. Wheat was transformed into increasingly refined flours, used in breads, biscuits, cakes, pasta, and a multitude of long-lasting foods. Little by little, the industry discovered that it wasn't just selling food, it was selling practicality, it was selling time, it was selling convenience. In the decades following the Great Wars, especially after World War II, the economy accelerated. Families began working longer hours outside the home. Refrigerators became commonplace. Supermarkets replaced small markets in many places. Frozen, canned, and packaged products began to occupy more and more space in kitchens. It was difficult to see this as a problem. In fact, it seemed exactly the opposite. Who would refuse food that lasted for months on the shelf? Who wouldn't want to prepare a meal in just a few minutes after a long day at work? These changes have made life easier for millions of people, and they continue to do so today. The important point is to understand that the industrialization of food was not born to harm health. It arose to solve real problems: preservation, transportation, microbiological safety, waste reduction, and supplying growing populations. This context is essential to avoid a simplistic view of history. Not all technology applied to food is harmful. Pasteurization has saved countless lives. Refrigeration has reduced foodborne illnesses. Fortification with vitamins and minerals has helped prevent nutritional deficiencies in various populations. The problem began when another objective gained increasing strength. In addition to feeding people, it was necessary to win over consumers. Competition between companies grew, and with it came a powerful question: how do you make someone choose one product among dozens of practically identical options? The answer forever changed our relationship with food. Food engineers began to study texture. Chemists perfected aromas. Experts developed combinations of sugar, fat, and salt, capable of making certain products extremely palatable. Marketing has transformed food into symbols of happiness, comfort, convenience, and success. Packaging has ceased to merely protect the product. It has begun to sell an experience. Meanwhile, daily life has also changed. Family meals have decreased. People ate faster and faster, in front of the television, then in front of the computer. Today, often looking at a cell phone screen. Without realizing it, we stopped adapting food to our bodies. We gradually began to adapt our bodies to the rhythm of food produced by the industry. This was not a conspiracy. It was the result of the sum of technological advances, economic changes, cultural transformations, and new consumption habits. For decades, almost no one noticed the depth of this change. After all, if there was food in abundance, why be suspicious? But there was an important detail that would remain practically invisible for many years. While food was changing, our bodies remained exactly the same. Our brains, our hormones, our digestive system, and our metabolism still functioned like those of a human being who evolved in a completely different environment. It is precisely in this mismatch between human evolution and modern diets that one of the most fascinating discoveries in nutritional science begins. If it were possible to go back in time and visit a supermarket from the 1950s, many people would be surprised. There were processed products, it's true. Canned goods, sliced bread, soft drinks, and frozen foods were already beginning to gain ground. But compared to the current scenario, the offer was much more limited. Over the decades, however, a silent change occurred. It wasn't just the quantity of food that increased, it was the way it came to be conceived. Instead of simply preserving natural ingredients, the industry began to create products formulated from food fractions. Refined starches, vegetable oils, isolated proteins, sugars, flavorings, colorings, emulsifiers, thickeners, and a long list of additives that, individually, undergo safety assessments, but which have profoundly transformed the experience of eating. It was in this context that a new type of food emerged. Not just processed, but ultra-processed. This term doesn't automatically mean that a food is poison or should be eliminated from the diet. It describes products whose industrial formulation goes far beyond traditional culinary preparation, combining refined ingredients and additives to offer convenience, long shelf life, and a very appealing sensory profile. And this is where most people fail to realize what has really changed. Our brains did not evolve in an environment where highly palatable foods were available 24 hours a day. For almost all of human history, finding food required effort. It was necessary to walk, to hunt, to plant, to wait for the harvest. Today, you just open a cupboard or touch your cell phone screen. In a few minutes, an entire meal arrives at your doorstep. Our food environment has changed at an impressive speed. But our biology hasn't had time to keep up with this transformation. The human brain was shaped to value energy-rich foods because, for thousands of years, calories were a scarce resource. Preferring sweet or fatty flavors increased the chances of survival during periods of famine. Now imagine that same biological system living in a world where high-calorie foods are available at any time, often accompanied by advertising campaigns, promotions, and eye-catching packaging. The consequence is not just eating more, it's thinking less about the decision to eat. Many food choices happen on autopilot. Research in behavior shows that factors such as packaging size, product position on the shelf, lighting, background music, advertisements, and even the ease of opening a package can influence consumption without the person consciously realizing it. This means that our decisions are not always solely the result of willpower. The environment plays a huge role. Another almost invisible detail is the gradual increase in portion sizes. When comparing photographs of meals served in restaurants in the 1970s and 1980s with current ones, the difference is striking. Cups have become larger. Snacks have increased in size. Packages now offer more units. Desserts have grown. When a larger portion becomes the new standard, our brain quickly begins to see it as normal. This phenomenon has become known among researchers as a change in the perception of what constitutes an adequate amount of food. Little by little, what once seemed excessive begins to seem like just an ordinary meal. There's another fascinating aspect as well. Modern foods don't just compete for taste, they compete for our attention. Each package vies for a few seconds of our gaze. Each advertisement tries to create an emotional association. It's not uncommon for a food to be presented as a reward after a difficult day, as a symbol of affection. or as an indispensable part of happy family moments. Over time, eating ceases to respond solely to hunger. It also begins to respond to stress, boredom, anxiety, celebration, and even the habit of watching a series or working in front of the computer. Food begins to occupy functions that previously belonged to other aspects of life. This doesn't happen because people are weak. It happens because the environment has been carefully designed to stimulate this behavior. At the same time, a curious paradox has emerged. There has never been so much information about food. Books, podcasts, videos, influencers, diets, apps. And yet, it has never been so difficult to know who to believe. One day, fat seems to be the great villain. On the other hand, sugar occupies that place. Then, new fads, quick fixes, and miracle solutions emerge. Amid so many contradictory messages, many people conclude that eating healthily is too complicated. But science is beginning to point in a different direction. Instead of looking for a single culprit nutrient or a miracle food, researchers have begun to observe entire dietary patterns, the overall quality of the diet, and the degree of food processing. This shift in perspective has revealed something important. Perhaps the question has never been, which food is bad for you? Perhaps the correct question is, what kind of food environment are we creating for ourselves? Because when the environment changes, habits change. And when habits change over years or decades, the effects appear slowly in the body. It is precisely at this point that the investigation enters its most important phase. Now that we understand how our relationship with food has been transformed, it's time to discover what scientific studies have actually found about the impacts of this change. And some of these findings challenge ideas that seemed unquestionable. For a long time, nutritional science has tried to answer a seemingly simple question: why have chronic diseases increased so much over the last century? Initially, the search for answers focused on isolated nutrients. Fat was placed in the spotlight. Then came cholesterol, salt, carbohydrates, sugar, and more recently, different types of fats and proteins. Each new discovery seemed to point to a new culprit. But there was a problem. People don't eat nutrients. They eat food. And, above all, they follow dietary patterns that repeat themselves every day. That's when researchers began to look at food as a whole system, instead of analyzing only isolated components. This change in perspective revealed something surprising. In several studies conducted in different countries, dietary patterns rich in ultra-processed foods have been associated with a higher risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and other chronic diseases. It is important to emphasize that association does not in itself mean cause and effect. Still, when different studies point in the same direction and the results are consistent, confidence in these observations increases. One of the best-known studies in this area compared people who consumed a diet based mainly on minimally processed foods with others who followed a diet rich in ultra-processed foods, maintaining similar amounts of calories and similar proportions of macronutrients. The result was striking. When given the freedom to eat as much as they wanted, participants exposed to the diet rich in ultra-processed foods consumed, on average, more calories per day and gained weight in a few weeks. Those who received minimally processed foods tended to eat less spontaneously, reported greater satiety, and, in some cases, lost weight. This raised an important hypothesis. Perhaps the problem is not just how many calories a food contains, but how it influences our eating behavior. This is where fascinating mechanisms of the body come into play. When we eat, the body doesn't just count energy, it also interprets signals. Chewing sends information to the brain. The stomach expands. Hormones are released. The gut constantly communicates with the nervous system. This set of signals helps determine when we feel hungry and when we realize we have eaten enough. Very soft, highly refined, and easy to chew foods tend to be eaten more quickly. And when we eat fast, the brain may take longer to receive satiety signals. In practice, this means that it's possible to consume a large amount of energy before even realizing that you've had enough. Another aspect investigated by science is the so-called energy density. Imagine two plates with the same volume. One is mainly composed of vegetables, legumes, beans, and minimally processed proteins. The other includes snacks, filled cookies, and processed sweets. Visually, they may occupy a similar space, but the amount of calories is very different. Foods with high energy density concentrate a lot of energy in a small volume. This facilitates high calorie consumption without causing the same feeling of a full stomach. In addition, foods rich in fiber and protein usually require more chewing and remain longer in the digestive system, promoting satiety in many people. But perhaps one of the most fascinating areas of current research is hidden within our own gut. For decades, it was believed that gut bacteria played only a secondary role in digestion. Today, we know that they participate in much more complex functions. The so-called gut microbiota is made up of trillions of microorganisms that help ferment fiber, produce substances important for the body, and interact with the immune system and metabolism. The composition of this community varies considerably between people and is influenced by several factors, including diet. Diets rich in varied plant foods and fiber tend to favor a more diverse microbiota. Conversely, dietary patterns low in fiber and high in highly refined products can reduce this diversity in some people. Although many questions remain unanswered, researchers are investigating how these changes can influence metabolic and inflammatory processes over time. Another frequently cited concept is low-grade chronic inflammation. Unlike the intense inflammation that occurs during an infection or injury, this form is subtle and persistent. It does not cause immediate pain or obvious symptoms, but it can be related to the development of various chronic diseases when combined with factors such as sedentary lifestyle, excess body fat, smoking, sleep deprivation, and poor dietary patterns. It is important to emphasize that no single food determines this process on its own. Health results from the interaction between diet, physical activity, genetics, sleep quality, stress, environment, and access to medical care. This integrated view represents one of the greatest consensuses in current science. It's also worth remembering that not all processed foods are the same. Freezing vegetables, pasteurizing milk, producing natural yogurts, or canning beans can increase safety, reduce waste, and facilitate access to nutritious foods. The degree of processing by itself doesn't tell the whole story. The context of the diet as a whole remains essential. In recent years, researchers have begun to emphasize less the search for a single villain and more the importance of dietary patterns. Diets with a higher presence of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, good quality proteins, and minimally processed foods are consistently associated with better health indicators when compared to patterns rich in ultra-processed foods. This doesn't mean living under permanent restrictions, nor does it mean turning every meal into a reason for guilt. It means understanding that the body responds to what we do repeatedly, not to a single choice. After decades of searching for answers in a single ingredient, science seems to point to a much broader conclusion. The true protagonist of this story is not a specific food. It's the food environment we build around ourselves and the habits that this environment encourages every day. But if the evidence is becoming increasingly clear, why is it still so difficult to put this knowledge into practice? The answer lies not only in biology, it also lies in how we live. After learning the story and understanding what science has been discovering, an inevitable question arises. If we know so much about food, why is change still so difficult? The answer is far from simple, because most of the time, the choices we make at the table begin long before we sit down to eat. They begin when the alarm clock rings, when time seems insufficient, when traffic delays the day, when work demands a few more hours, when the to-do list grows faster than we can accomplish. In the midst of this routine, food ceases to be a moment of pause and becomes just another commitment. And, naturally, our brain looks for the easiest solution. That's why practicality has become one of the most valuable ingredients in modern eating. Imagine two situations. In the first, preparing a meal requires washing vegetables, chopping ingredients, cooking, waiting, serving, and then washing all the dishes. In the second, you just need to open a package or heat a product for a few minutes. Even knowing that the first option may be more nutritious, many people choose the second simply because it fits better into the reality of that day. It's not about a lack of information, it's about context. This is one of the most important points revealed by research on eating behavior. We don't choose solely based on knowledge. We choose according to what is available, accessible, financially viable, and compatible with our routine. That's why experts often say that the environment shapes habits. Think about the path to the supermarket checkout. How many times do chocolates, candies, and snacks appear precisely when a person has already spent several minutes making decisions? It's not by chance. After a sequence of choices, our brain tends to exhibit decision fatigue. The more decisions we make throughout the day, the greater the tendency to opt for the simplest or most immediate alternative. Another example is at home. Foods that remain visible on the table tend to be consumed more frequently. Those that require preparation or are forgotten at the back of the refrigerator end up being chosen less often. Small details alter big behaviors. There is also an economic component. In many regions, fresh foods can be more expensive, require travel to specific markets or fairs, and have a shorter shelf life. Many ultra-processed products offer a long shelf life, quick preparation, and constant promotions. For a family with a limited budget and little time available, this difference is significant. Therefore, reducing the debate about food to the idea of just choosing better ignores social, economic, and cultural factors that profoundly influence the plates of millions of people. There is also the influence of childhood. A large part of food preferences begins to be built very early. The flavors present in the first meals, family customs, and cultural traditions accompany many people for decades. Food is also memory. It is affection, it is celebration, it is identity. The aroma of a cake can remind one of grandparents' house. A traditional dish can represent family gatherings. A snack can bring back memories of adolescence. Therefore, eating is never just a biological act. It's also an emotional experience. The food industry understood this long ago. That's why many advertising campaigns don't just sell a product. They sell happy moments, togetherness, fun, comfort, belonging. When these emotional elements combine with practicality and flavor, an extremely powerful combination is created. Another often forgotten factor is sleep. Insufficient sleep alters hormones related to appetite, increases the feeling of hunger in many people, and reduces the willingness to cook or exercise. Chronic stress produces a similar effect. In situations of constant pressure, it's common to seek highly palatable foods as a form of immediate comfort. This doesn't mean a lack of discipline. It means that our bodies try to respond to environmental demands using mechanisms that made sense during human evolution. The problem is that the modern environment offers quick rewards with virtually no limits. This is where many people enter a cycle that is difficult to perceive. Busy days lead to more practical choices. These choices can reduce satiety and promote higher energy consumption. Excess weight can make it difficult to sleep and decrease the willingness to engage in physical activity. Fatigue increases the search for fast food, and the cycle begins again. Breaking this pattern doesn't just depend on motivation, it depends on creating conditions so that the healthy choice is also the easiest choice. That's precisely why many experts advocate for changes that go beyond the individual. School environments with better quality food, Policies that promote access to fruits, vegetables, and legumes. Clear information on labels. Nutrition education from childhood. Encouragement of home cooking. These measures do not eliminate individual responsibility, but they recognize that health is influenced by the environment in which we live. At the same time, there is good news. Our brains learn. Just as unhealthy habits can be built up over the years, so can more balanced habits. Small changes repeated daily have the potential to produce much greater effects than radical transformations that last only a few weeks. And this is perhaps the most important message of this entire investigation. We don't need to go back to the past. We don't need to reject all technology. Nor do we need to live in fear of food. We need to learn to use scientific knowledge to build an environment that works for us, not against us. But how do we do this in practice? Without extreme diets, without guilt, and without turning every meal into a battle. That's exactly what we'll see next. After going through this entire journey, one conclusion begins to become clear. The biggest change doesn't need to happen in the industry or in the supermarket. It starts within our own routine. For decades, food has been treated as a battle between good and bad foods. One side should be eliminated, the other consumed without limits. But current science points to a much more balanced path. What really matters is the dietary pattern built over time. A single meal hardly determines the future of health. It's hundreds, perhaps thousands, of choices repeated over the years that make a difference. This completely changes the way we see food. Instead of seeking the perfect diet, it's more worthwhile to build an environment that facilitates good decisions. And this can begin with surprisingly simple changes. The first of these happens even before hunger appears. Observe your kitchen. Which foods are immediately within sight? Are fruits visible or hidden in the refrigerator drawer? Foods that require less effort are usually those consumed most frequently. Small changes in home organization can influence habits without constantly requiring willpower. Another strategy is to recover a habit that seemed common in the past but has lost ground with the fast-paced routine. Cooking. It's not necessary to prepare elaborate recipes every day. Even simple meals, made with basic ingredients, usually offer greater control over the amount of salt, sugar, fats, and additives used. Furthermore, cooking brings people closer to the origin of food. When we wash a tomato, cut vegetables, or season beans, we create a different connection than when opening a ready-made package. It's also worth paying attention to labels, but without turning this moment into a complicated task. A practical tip is to look at the ingredient list. In general, the shorter and more composed of familiar foods, the closer that product is to its original form. Long lists full of unfamiliar ingredients indicate more complex formulations. This doesn't mean that all products with multiple ingredients should be avoided. The goal is to better understand what we are buying, not to cultivate fear. Another important point is to gradually increase the presence of minimally processed foods, fruits, vegetables, legumes, beans, lentils, whole grains, nuts, eggs, fish, fresh meats, milk, and dairy products with a lower degree of processing when part of a person's diet, offer fiber, vitamins, minerals, and bioactive compounds that work together, something that can hardly be reproduced solely by combining industrial ingredients. Variety also deserves attention. For a long time, the concern was only to ingest sufficient nutrients. Today we know that a diversified diet favors different needs of the body and can contribute to a richer and more resilient gut microbiota. This doesn't mean turning every meal into a calculation. It means adding color to the plate, trying different foods, valuing traditional preparations, rediscovering family recipes. In many cases, innovation can lie precisely in recovering old knowledge. Another frequently neglected aspect is the rhythm of the meal. Eating in front of the television, computer, or cell phone increases the chance of consuming food automatically. When we pay attention only to the screen, we perceive fewer hunger and satiety signals. Setting aside a few minutes to eat calmly may seem like a detail, but it's a detail that helps the brain better recognize when the body has received enough. Planning also makes a difference. Many choices considered impulsive happen because there was no other alternative available. Preparing some meals in advance, keeping washed fruit in the refrigerator, or having basic ingredients always available reduces dependence on last-minute solutions. And perhaps the most important recommendation is to abandon the all-or-nothing logic. Many people start with extremely rigid changes. They eliminate dozens of foods. They create rules that are difficult to maintain. For a few days, everything seems to work. Then comes the tiredness, the frustration, and often the complete abandonment of the plan. There is a more sustainable path. Instead of asking, how can I change my entire diet today? Perhaps it's better to ask, what small change can I repeat for the next few months? Replacing a sugary drink with water at some meals, including fruit at breakfast. Preparing dinner at home one more time a week. Taking a meal to work instead of always ordering delivery. Small changes seem discreet, but when repeated hundreds of times, they become habits, and habits shape results. It's also important to recognize that nutrition doesn't exist in isolation. Sleeping better, practicing physical activity regularly, controlling stress, maintaining social connections. All of this influences our relationship with food. Health doesn't originate from a single food. It emerges from the sum of many behaviors. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson of this entire investigation. Technology has profoundly transformed the way we produce food. This has brought extraordinary benefits, but it has also created unprecedented challenges. Today, we have the opportunity to take advantage of scientific advances without abandoning what has always underpinned good nutrition: variety, balance, conscious preparation, and respect for the body's own signals. In the end, eating has never been just about fueling the body. It's one of the most repeated habits in life, and precisely for this reason, small choices made daily have a silent power to build our future. Now only one question remains. After learning all this history, will we still see our plate in the same way? The history of modern food is not a narrative of heroes and villains. There is no single food responsible for the health problems we see today. Nor is there a magic solution capable of solving everything overnight. What exists is a silent transformation that began a little over a century ago and continues to happen before our eyes. Throughout this investigation, we have seen that the industrialization of food has brought extraordinary achievements. It has helped reduce hunger in many regions, made food supplies more secure, expanded food preservation, and allowed millions of people to access products that were previously scarce. But at the same time, this evolution has profoundly modified the environment in which we make our choices. Today, we are surrounded by a virtually unlimited supply of ready-to-eat foods. We live in a fast-paced routine. We have little time to cook. We are exposed daily to advertising messages, promotions, and stimuli that encourage constant consumption. And we do all this with an organism that still carries adaptations developed over thousands of years of evolution. Perhaps this is the main discovery of this documentary. The problem has never been just the food. It is the relationship we have built with it. When we understand this, we stop looking for culprits and start looking for smarter solutions. Instead of fear, knowledge. Instead of guilt, balance. Instead of miraculous promises, small, consistent changes. If you take away just a few ideas from this research, let them be these. The first is to remember that no single food defines your health. What really matters is the dietary pattern built up over months and years. The second is to value minimally processed foods whenever possible, without turning eating into a constant source of anxiety. The third is to create an environment that facilitates good choices, because sustainable habits depend much more on context than on willpower. The fourth is to never lose curiosity. Science is constantly evolving, and understanding how food interacts with our bodies allows us to make more conscious decisions. And finally, perhaps the most important lesson of all, each meal represents an opportunity, not to seek perfection, but to take a little better care of yourself. When we look to the past, we realize that food has always been much more than fuel. It has accompanied the evolution of humanity, built cultures, brought families closer, marked celebrations, crossed generations, and will continue to be part of our history. The difference is that now we have something that previous generations didn't possess: the scientific knowledge to understand how our choices influence our health without giving up the pleasure of eating. In the end, perhaps the great revolution of the future won't be in creating a new food, but in learning to value, with more awareness, what we put on our plates every day. If this documentary has given you a new perspective on modern eating, share your impressions in the comments. What discovery caught your attention the most? Your experience can enrich the conversation and help others reflect on their own habits. If you enjoy content that combines science, history, and health in an accessible way, like and subscribe to the channel. This way, you can follow future investigations and help this content reach more people interested in understanding how the human body works based on evidence. And in the next documentary, we'll explore another fascinating question. Could some foods considered healthy, depending on the context, produce very different effects than we imagine? Until then, take care of your health with information, critical thinking, and balance. Because the best decisions rarely stem from fear. They stem from knowledge.